I don't want my characters, the ones I read and the ones I write actually, I don't want them to be the same at the end as they are at the beginning. I want there to be a journey both as a reader and as a writer. I'm Andrea Goldsmith, and my new novel, my ninth, is called The Buried Life. It's being published by the small Australian independent Transit Lounge, and it will be released on Saturday, the 1st of March. The Buried Life started with a couple of ideas, and they were death and uncertainty, two issues that are common to all of us and to elements of being human that cause a great deal of distress. And once I started exploring the ideas, the characters came about. And my novels are very much novels of characterization. And the first person that I created was Adrian, who's a scholar of death. He's 42, 43 on the first page when we meet him. And he's a temperate sort of man until something happens to him. And it's actually a piece of music. He is not at all musical, but something hits him with this piece of music. And his life after that changes. There are two other characters, and they all relate together, though I do see Kezzy, a 28-year-old papermaker, very much as the linchpin. She's Adrian's closest friend in the neighbourhood, even though there's 15 years separating them. But I do see her as the linchpin between Adrian and the other main character, Laura, who is in her late 50s, and she has been in a long marriage and she blindly adores her husband. Now, I mentioned about uncertainty. Many people, when they fly from uncertainty, they're looking for concrete things, and it might be fundamentalism in many different ways, and it might be fundamentalist religion, and it might be ideology. And I also think that there's fundamentalism in relationships. And it is this notion of fundamentalism that certainly joins Kezzy, who grew up in a Pentecostal community that now has rejected her, and Laura from her very, very different background. It's for people who love rich stories that wrap around characters. And I mean, I think this is what stories have always done. I mean, it's why we've been caught by them. And I also think it's for people who want to read about contemporary life, things that they can latch into, friendship, love, delusion in marriage, all of the sort, or in relationships, the sorts of things that are common to human beings. So it's realist Australian, probably literary fiction, but it's easy. There's nothing, there's no fancy stylistic sorts of things. The sort of people that, you know, have enjoyed, I'm going to call on the best, who've enjoyed people like Margaret Atwood and that sort of group. So genre, contemporary Australian literary fiction, novels of characterization. The thing that I love most of all is that they connect with my characters and they say, I didn't want to leave them. And the other equally good thing is my novels all have an open ending. And I just love it when readers bring what they think has happened or will happen after they've closed the book. I really love that reader engagement. is my ninth novel, and that doesn't count the 3 practice novels that I wrote before Gracious Living, which was my first published one. I knew at a very young age that I wanted to write novels, at a very young age, and then 8. I was a big reader. I started reading well before I started school. And at the point at which I realised that that these books that I loved and plunged into had a writer and that was a reputable job, I thought, I want that. So I was 8, and I did the usual sort of, childish writing and adolescent angst-ridden poetry. It was my father who very, very sensibly said, that's all very well, and yes, I do want, I hope that you do become a writer, but you also need to earn a living. So I trained as a speech pathologist, and I wrote at nights and on the weekends. The first 2 novels were practice novels. They never saw the light of day, and I expected they were practice novels. I read and I wrote, and I read and I wrote. The third one I did send it out to McPhee Grivell. It was a long time ago. And I got what is known in the trade as an extremely good rejection. They called me in. They supplied coffee and biscuits. Ah, yes, it was very, very good. And talked to me about whether they said that the book would find a publisher, but did I want this book to be the one that launched me on the literary stage? It gave me confidence because they assumed that I had a career. By that time, I'd actually started Gracious Living, and so I thought, okay, I'll put the one that they rejected aside, and I'll go back to it after Gracious Living, and of course, I didn't. And I've been fortunate. My first 3 novels were with Penguin. I've not had an issue with getting published, which perhaps points more to my age and when I started rather than anything else. I'm pleased I'm not starting now. But it's been a really good career for me. And of course, like most writers, I've also had to work, and my other job wasn't speech pathology after the first 15 years. I taught creative writing. My writing practice, I don't even think of it as practice. The thing is that I love sitting alone, well, actually with my dog, in a room, reading and writing. I've always loved revision because it makes the work better. I mean, so we writers are perfectionists. So, it's got to get better and better, and the way of doing it is with the rubbish bin and with revision. So I love that. I love revision. I love getting inside language, which is to say I write as much as I possibly can. I'm not taught for the past, it's 15 years now. But even when I taught, what I'd do is I'd keep my teaching on certain days. So I could go to my desk early. I'm a very early riser. Go to my desk early, and I'd stay there for as long as I could, with breaks to make coffee and go to the toilet. My lucky dip question is, what is your favourite place in all the world? My favourite place is in a snowy wilderness in winter, in that fabulous half light, because the days are extremely short. I've seen it in Lapland in winter. I've seen it in Iceland in winter. So favourite place is my favourite environment. I'm a cold weather person, but that smooth, gorgeous, snow-filled wilderness and the quiet and the light, there is nothing to compare. Some writers have always stood up for beliefs and political beliefs and what have you. And in fact, on this very day, my name is amongst 500 Australian Jews who protesting against Trump's redevelopment of Gaza into the Middle Eastern Riviera. So writers, I think, Well, I would say myself, I think it is important that if you've got a public profile, that you make yourself available for what you think is right. Um, that happens more often these days because of things like social media. But I would also say, if you want to be a writer of novels, that long form, I would be taking digital Sabbaths several times a week. That sort of cutting through your attention, what it does, it sabotages that deep immersion that's required if you're going to write a novel. So in many ways, I'm saying that things are much the same, but you have to be aware of social media. And for example, for this book, um, there's so much more in the way of podcasts and online this, that, and the other than even for my last book, which came out 6 years. It was before COVID, 6 years ago. So you have to be aware of it. I'm really pleased that because there are so many things like podcasts, I don't have to do social media, and I don't. My reading's divided up into 3 lots, and this happens every day. I would read poetry every day. I mean, I do love the language, and you know, the poets do it rather well, the good poets do it rather well. And I have a particular fondness, it's interesting because it's translation for the Polish poets. And in fact, Adam Zagajewski and Zbigniew Herbert both figure in The Buried Life. So I read poetry. It might only be one poem, but I read poetry every day. I read nonfiction in the morning, and the nonfiction have been reading has been to do with the digital age and also the political things that are happening in a world where people like Trump dominate. Why am I saying people like Trump? Trump dominates. So the book that I'm nearly finished now is Harari's Nexus, which is it's a history of information. It's fairly recent, and it just tells me about the world in which I live and also gives me arguments to fight against people who disagree. So there we are. The fiction that I finished yesterday is a very good example of the fiction that I like. It's by Sonia Orchard, and it was written in 2009, and it's called Virtuoso. And it is a beautifully controlled, written, fictionalized account of a very famous Australian pianist whose name was Noel Newton Wood. It doesn't feel like a fiction. It feels to me like fiction. It's just beautifully controlled. So why do I like it? The characters just leap off the page. The language is gorgeous, and it takes me on a journey. I like my novels to. I don't want my characters, the ones I read and the ones I write actually, I don't want them to be the same at the end as they are at the beginning. I want there to be a journey both as a reader and as a writer. My first author as a child is engraved in me, and it was Enid Blyton. I was a very early reader, and my mother also was a reader, and she fed me books. And Enid Blyton told a fabulous story. There was the Secret Seven, the famous five, Folk of the Faraway Tree, and the Magic Wishing Chair. In terms of their vocabulary, for a very young child, 3, 4, 5, it didn't matter that the vocabulary was constricted. She taught me the power of a story. And, you know, back in those days, I mean, I grew up in the 50s. I was born in 1950. You always shared a bedroom. Houses were very small. There was no privacy. But if I was reading, I was left alone. And if I was reading, it meant that I escaped into worlds that were beyond the, you know, sometimes troublesome environment of the family. I will be forever grateful to Enid Blyton getting this book out. which is always fun. I mean, I actually enjoy it as long as people are nice to me. Um, I'm hopeless when it comes to bad reviews, absolutely hopeless, but all authors are. Um, I write articles and essays, and I think the time has come for me to have a look at them and see if there's something I can do with them. Yes, I'm thinking of some sort of collection. As for the next novel, you know, there's always, by the time you finish the last one, there's always ideas and notions that are left over, and you think, mm. But I'm just holding them at bay at the moment because I really would like to have a look at some of these shorter pieces. It's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.